which gives me the opportunity to introduce Terry. And many of you have seen Terry before, and of course she's a wonderful designer and an innovator and an entrepreneur responsible for creating sustainable minds. And she's going to stand up and start her presentation while I'm actually putting it onto the laptop. Will that work okay?
Thank you, Ken. And it's a pleasure to be here again for the third DaS symposium.
Fourth.
This is the fourth? No, third.
Is it? Anybody know?
Third.
Three? Okay.
Yeah, they kind of are running together. So 4 years ago, when I gave that talk, nobody believed green was really going to happen. It wasn't really on the radar screens of people. And I'm starting the talk just to give the context that we've seen this massive sea change in the entire ecology of manufacturing. And we're all trying to put our arms around even how to describe how massive the sea change is. Considerations around every type of process with suppliers, people in the organization, the cycle of how products, as we've been talking about, how products are designed and measured is iteratively changing. And what we've seen over the past 5 years is a kind of a march towards how is this going to shake out, but we're really still just at the beginning. But we in this room have kind of seen this evolution, and nope, the clicker's not working. I'll just use this. Okay. And this is a slide that I used in my talk in 2009 when I kind of challenged people in the room who was thinking this. You know, my customers aren't asking for this. And I had three comebacks to that. You know, one is customers can't ask for innovation. The second is that customers, if you're going to wait till customers ask for it, you're too late to have a viable solution. And the third, I kind of backed off from the third comment, but I'll say it now, and I think it's appropriate following your presentation, is that we have a moral obligation as the people that make software for every engineer and designer who makes everything in the built environment to make smarter tools so we can make better decisions. And so I think we have reached a land grab opportunity. There's been enough action in the space, there's been enough momentum, there's been enough awareness, there's enough money on the line to create, I think, a land grab situation in the software, design and engineering software marketplace. So what's changed? Here's what we've seen. And I'm talking about product development because that's the space that I'm in. Over these past few years, we've seen the initiatives around greener product development in companies go from a few guys saying, geez, we should kind of figure this out, to it's a corporate initiative. And I would be surprised if there were any major company, Fortune 1000 company, that didn't have some team at some stage of development or conversation saying, how are we really going to get our arms around this? Who's involved? What are we doing? Now, it's not just companies that are doing this. This is the other big thing that's transpired, is that industry organizations are trying to get their arms around it and set a precedent for the companies in their industries. And I show just an example of 4 across the bottom here. Oops. These on either end, the Sustainability Consortium and the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, I'm going to drill into some of their content today in my presentation. These are 2 industry associations that emerged specifically to take on the challenge of defining what greenness or sustainability will mean in their industries. Apparel specifically, the Sustainability Consortium is dealing with many product categories. But then the traditional trade associations, and here are 2, the Plumbing Manufacturers International, PMI, and INDA, this is the Industry Association for the Non-Woven Fabrics Industry. There's an industry association for every possible conception of a product. This is actually a big industry association. But even these groups have task forces or groups of people who are normally competitors coming together to say, geez, we've got to get out ahead of this before any regulation happens that's going to change the way we do business, or some third-party certifier, not part of our business, makes up some certification that we're going to have to comply to. So we got to get out ahead of this and define for ourselves what this is going to mean and benchmark it for ourselves. So just to run through the real business drivers for these changes, we have the external drivers of the depletion of natural resources driving up costs. We already have a lot of regulation starting from the EU and spreading around the world, managing and mitigating risk from supply chain partners. So, with Mattel being the example of the poster child who got lead in the paint from their Chinese suppliers and sold it in dolls for children. And then the internal drivers at companies, you like to talk about competing with brands that have already greened themselves or raising the bar in the marketplace. But the real benefits and the real kind of gold or brass ring, Ken was just riffing on the innovation word, but that is the real opportunity, is new product innovation that eco-design can drive that ultimately brings new products to market with access to new customers and new revenues. So just to validate that story, in GreenBiz in January, they published some results of a study they did with manufacturing executives globally and interviewed chief decision makers, asking them the question, what are the biggest drivers for corporate sustainability in 2012? And the top answers were, for most companies, it's going to be a combination of consumer demand, financial savings, constrained resources, regulatory requirements, long-term business viabilities, and company values. So, there's enough movement inside companies understanding all of the drivers, saying we've got to figure out how to respond holistically to those. Next top answers, they'll need to become savvy life cycle practitioners, innovators, and collaborators. Here's another one. I threw this in for you guys. Building green has shifted from a good thing to a necessary thing. And they said the biggest and the winner is the biggest sustainability driver will be innovation. So just a quick primer for some of you folks who are not familiar with life cycle assessment. It's an objective and comprehensive method to evaluate the relative greenness of a system, a product, a building. It's an internationally recognized method. ISO has an extensive series describing how it needs to be conducted, and it's conducted like any design problem or any experiment. You start by defining the scope and goals. What do you want to learn? How much of the system do you want to analyze? Then you build the model. You collect the inventory and the data. You build the model, and then you use some scientific methods to analyze the impacts, to answer the questions that you're looking for. And they're very clear to show that there's lots of interpretation along the way, because it's such an explicit process. You can't possibly have all the data and all the inputs. So there's a lot of assumptions, there's a lot of interpretation, and there's a lot of iteration between each of these stages. It's a very fluid and iterative process. Now think about all those business drivers affect lots of people in a company. And there's lots of people in a company now who participate in making decisions about products. Not only what to make, but how to make them. And so there's lots of people who are being added to departments, and there's lots of departments or organizations and companies who now have to work together, who've never worked together, never talked to each other, never used the same tools. But it's critical that they collaborate to respond to these business drivers and ultimately achieve innovation. Because designing greener products ultimately is not a one-size-fits-all tool kind of problem. And this is why, again, I think it's a land grab situation here. One solution is not going to solve the problem. The LCA software today is a very nascent field of software. The tools themselves are expensive, they're very technical, they're very explicit, and impossible to scale. Designing greener products is a unique convergence of requirements. It's not just LCA, it's not just PLM, it's not just CAD, it's not just ERP, it's all of them. And then most importantly, as we've been discussing this morning, it's not a tool problem, or it's not just a tool problem, right? It's a cultural organization, process, and workflow problem. So, once again, big business drivers, big opportunity, big problems that are achievable to solve, because we're going to solve them iteratively as a community, and that's why we're sitting here in this room. So I'm going to show you two presentations today from two representatives from two industry consortia, the Sustainability Consortium, Kevin Dooley, and following that will be a presentation by Kevin Mayette, who is the technical lead at the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Kevin was here this morning having a conversation with some of us simply because he wanted to find out. We're doing all this stuff. Are you guys with us? How are you going to work with us? Because we want to get this stuff out into the world, and we need you guys who are already building tools to say you want to take our data and our knowledge and put it in your tools. So just to show you the members of this consortia, they have a lot of them, and they're very diverse. Walmart started this organization, and so these members range from Walmart to Disney to Alcoa to 3M, Unilever. It's a lot of money to be a member, but all these companies want to have a seat at the table, and they want to be beneficiaries of the results. So the Sustainability Consortium was created to make decisions about products more sustainable across the entire life cycle. And so this whole consortia is based on life cycle thinking and life cycle assessment. So all of the data and the tools that they're creating is based on this approach. You can see here that their mission is to design and implement credible, transparent, and scalable science-based measurement and reporting systems accessible for all producers, retailers, and users of consumer products. So we're talking about scale. These guys are thinking about how to standardize and codify how to measure, and they're looking for the technology players to push it out at scale. So they're using a multi-stakeholder approach. They're defining how these measurement tools should or could work. The goal is to enable proactive innovation in sustainability and ultimately unlock more value in the supply chain. Where they are in their process right now is they're developing what they're calling category level rules, where they're identifying where typical hotspots are in certain types of product categories, and again, codifying and defining those, sharing the information on the best practices. They're publishing these category benchmark reports. There's a template for these. In the future, they'll create key performance indicators. So how will environmental performance be measured in each of these product categories, because there are different environmental impacts that these different product categories create, and to be able to create tools to benchmark against these baseline products that they're going to create and provide. They've created to date about 8 of these category dossiers. They believe there are about 800 of them that would represent about 80 to 90% of all the product categories that exist in the world. And they have the ambitious goal of creating 100 of these category dossiers by Q1 of next year. So the category dossier includes this profile and will include these KPIs and metrics and whatnot. Here, I already said this. They're working on 100 level 1 products across 8 sectors. The sectors were selected primarily because their early members are retailers. It was started by Walmart, and the early members were retailers, so they're focusing on primarily retail, but also adding some industrial and agricultural categories. Moving along to talk about the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. So the Sustainability Consortium being broadly focused on many product categories. This was an industry that came together, the apparel industry, to define what green was going to mean, and these are some of their members. You can see this is also fairly diverse. It's almost a convergence of the Outdoor Industry Association with apparel manufacturers and retailers. And same kind of model. They're competitors sitting down at the table trying to figure out how are we going to measure, what tools are we going to create, where's the data coming from. And they've actually rolled out a first phase of a tool. It's a spreadsheet-based tool, and it's being deployed in China. Kevin just came back from China where they were doing some training sessions. He said the suppliers in China were lining up to come to this event, out the door, because these guys all see that this is the future. If they can supply, if they can make products this way and supply their components to the major manufacturers, they're going to win. So out the door, the attendance. So Kevin extends his apology. This should have been him standing up here giving this presentation. He sincerely apologized. And by the way, his day job, he's the Director of Product and Supply Chain Sustainability at REI. But he thought, oh my God, this is a great opportunity. I could come and stand up in front of this community and tell them what we need. So he had so much to say. I didn't edit his slide deck. But he isn't here because he's at the White House today, representing the outdoor apparel industry to receive recognition for their work in collaborating for a better, more sustainable supply chain and world. I think that's huge. Let's give Kevin a round of applause. So, like I said, I didn't edit Kevin's slides, so I'll pull out the salient points. Here his point is an unconventional challenge requires unconventional methods and solutions. He's talking about, collaboration with partners and competitors is required. I'm going to skip through some of this. Business survival will soon be dependent on this type of collaboration, and that progress will be made in steps, right? It will be iterative. We're never going to get it right, but we can keep going forward. And so accuracy is not possible, right? We can't let that slow us down. So here's his information systems problem statement. Here's what he's looking for. You need information systems that can support a comprehensive, integrated cross-supply chain view of product sustainability. The root causes of the scenario of the problem today is that language and measures are still incomplete, no way to coordinate, no fully useful data, either publicly or proprietary. It's hard to come by. There aren't standard ways of collecting it or measuring it. Supply chain information systems are disparate, disjointed, incomplete, and often unreliable for making meaningful decisions. And again, it's a cross-supply chain issue and can't be solved by any one value chain stakeholder. So he's created a visual model, and I'm just going to couch this in, he did it in Visio, and he said his computer crapped out and he wasn't able to save a PDF. So I'm going to show you the version of it that he was able to send. And the caption is that it represents all the discrete functions of a sustainability system. Some of these exist, some don't. Here's the picture. I think about half of it's not there. But you can see that they've given this supply chain model a lot of thought. This is specific to apparel. And they're looking to have this built. So a lot of thinking, again, about the information layers and how they need to be defined and ultimately made available. So public reference, public aggregated, shared, private. They've identified the showstoppers and some of the things that are really going to have to happen. He was real hot about this idea when I last spoke with him, this global facility registry, so that suppliers would have data just available about their physical plant that people could pull from, getting consistent with naming and nomenclature, and we've been talking about that in this community for the last 4 years, and managing chemicals and hazard management, so a common way for analyzing hazards. Material traceability, successful model that facilitates info sharing between LCI and LCA systems. More stuff there. Information exchange, index tools, and I'm going to wrap up on the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. He would welcome your thoughts, and if you would like to get in touch with Kevin, let me know. I was surprised he didn't put his email address. I should have put it in. But they're looking for help, and step up. The last piece I threw in was I don't want to talk only about life cycle assessment as though it's the only method for evaluating green. There's going to be a lot of different methods for measuring the relative greenness, because green is an outgrowth of reducing environmental impact. So the California DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substance Control, has put out some draft regulation around green chemistry. And the EPA, the federal government EPA, has always had toxicity at the top of its list of environmental impact reduction, even to the disappointment of some people in the environmental movement. The EPA thinks toxicity is more important than global warming. Some take umbrage with that. But the California DTSC has put out their own draft of their own green chemistry regs, and just like the European regs, any company anywhere in the world that will sell products into the state of California will need to be compliant with these green chemistry regulations. They put out the draft. It will be in review this summer. Anyone can participate in the review process. What the regulation says is that companies will have to demonstrate alternative assessments, that they're looking for alternatives actively for the chemicals that they're using today. And that's in the early stage of the enforcement of these regulations. They're saying, look, you got to take a life cycle approach to analyzing green chemistry. So this life cycle approach is here to stay. You have to look at the whole system, the whole life cycle, and then across that life cycle, look at what's causing the different environmental impacts. So there's going to be different tools, different methods, different data sets required. What was interesting, when I spoke with Bob, here's Bob. He's the guy at the DTSC, one of the key leaders of the new regulations. And I said to him, I said, Bob, how are you possibly going to enforce this set of regs? He said, Terry, he said, it took us 20 years to figure out how to evaluate recovery of brownfields. It took 20 years for companies to figure out how to recover brownfields. It took 20 years to figure out how we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of that recovery. He said, frankly, he said, I don't really know how we're going to enforce this. He said, but what I do know is that just getting companies to demonstrate life cycle thinking, that that's what they're doing, and they have proof that they're doing it, is how we're going to get going. And that is the starting point of the requirement. So coming back to the beginning of the story, what's changed in 4 years, from when none of us believed it to when we all believe it? Few people in companies, corporate initiatives, industry organizations, we're all on board. It's a land grab situation, and I hope everybody in here steps up. That's my story.
Perfect timing. Questions?
Maybe a little bit of a minority report. I disagree with your comment about maybe all the people in this room, but definitely not all the people in industry.
Absolutely, that's true.
Two of the problems. I'll take the easiest one first. California. The one way around the problem is what's happening in California. Companies are moving out of California. The aerospace industries, manufacturing capacity in California is rapidly approaching nil. The second issue is that the EPA is defining some of these standards to the level of background noise. You go out in the backyard in Denver and take a shovel full of dirt, you can find concentrations of what the EPA considers pollutants in my backyard, higher than some of the standards that they're promoting. And I think we need to understand risk better in the public community and in the government entities. That, just as one example, there are things in the vitamin pill. If you take a multivitamin every morning, there are items in that pill in sufficient quantities would kill you. But in small quantities, they're considered healthful. And so we need to be careful that we don't push some of these standards beyond the level of reasonable risk.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I mentioned that this summer, this draft green chemistry standard is going through open review. Anyone can participate. They are very aware that we're just at the beginning of figuring out what this means, and it needs to be a community to define, how we're going to get there. So I say you sign up and participate.
Okay, just a piece of information. I like this initiative you mentioned about this White House. In Europe exists for some years now in Geneva World Business Council Sustainable Development. So that, it's important maybe to see the parallel things. I think what the gentleman mentioned before about this risk and so on, in nuclear field we had in the beginning risk-based regulations. And the industry was very upset. And now it's called risk-informed regulation. Why not by association should we have LCA-informed regulation and decision-making process? Because based versus informed, it makes a lot of difference. The question I have to ask you now is the following. Because we are in a computer environment and so on and so forth, so we are very angry about the virus called Stuxnet now, which is really affecting the SCADA system, computerized system of all the industries. So we are upset with that, but Stuxnet went to a very high level of professionalism, which goes and attack nuclear plant, chemical plant, and so on. Why can we have the question? Can we have an anonymous type of initiative to have a sustainable attack on companies and the SCADA system? So now we are attacking to destroy something. Why don't we attack for them to be sustainable, so to speak? Is that a question in our environment? Can we design the software to attack, so to speak, companies in order to be sustainable, to be LCA-oriented? I'm just throwing a generic question.
That question prompts me to share something with you about Sustainable Minds, which is that 2 years ago we put up our SaaS-based software. It's not expensive. You can go sign up for a trial account. We have thousands of students and educators around the world using it now. We've never spent a dime marketing into education. We have over 300 colleges and universities around the world using sustainable mines. Business education, design education, engineering education. And it's an important indicator. You know, they're not paying a lot of money, but it's an indicator that education sees the need in the marketplace and is preparing, you know, the knowledge workers for the greener economy to come out and change the way we do things. If there were going to be a sustainability attack, I love that idea. I think we ought to mobilize the students. I think it's a great idea. I'm going to think about that.
And following on that note, and then we'll stop, I'm reminded of Thomas Kuhn's famous paradigm. He created the structure of scientific revolution, and he said, advancement happens one funeral at a time. And I'm certainly seeing in my own industry, it's the kids that are coming in now. They're coming out of the schools, and they're getting it. So our keynote presentation will be on risk, uncertainty, and resilience. But before then, please help yourself to a little bit of food, nourish yourself, get a little fresh air, and talk to people that you've not talked to before. And one final applause for Terry, please.